Started.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Nathan. I'm product manager here at Observe. I'd like to share the improvement we made for our AWS integration and how it addresses some of the common challenge our customers face today. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. I've been working for Observe for about 2.5 years as a product manager, and I'm focusing on helping customers send the data to Observe. Before Observe, I worked at Confluent as a product manager, responsible for Kafka Connect and connectors. Before that, I worked at MuleSoft as a product manager, responsible for MuleSoft connectors and its connectivity ecosystem. Before we talk about like what's improvement and what's new in the latest AWS integration, I'd like to give you the brief overview of what we are going to cover today. First, I will just briefly cover why you would send logs and metrics from AWS to Observe rather than just using AWS native services, a service called CloudWatch, or and how logs and metrics being typically collected from AWS. Next, I'll cover a common reported problem by our customers regarding the previous AWS integration, then how the new AWS integration has addressed these problems. And after that, I'll show you the demo how it works. So you might wonder at this moment, like, why do I even send these logs and metrics out of AWS? There are a couple of reasons why you would do it today. Like, not everything you're running is not necessarily just on AWS today. Many of our customers use like various services in AWS, let's say EC2, EKS, and RDS, but some of them also using like a GKE in the GCP and Azure Directory in the Azure. And also we still have customers still have a large footprint in the on-prem environment. So using CloudWatch on AWS couldn't give them a so-called like a single pane of glass. So you need some centralized place like Observe to have a full picture of what's going on your services. The second point I'd like to make here is customers have very valuable business data outside of AWS. It could be a customer list or a product list, or a list of support tickets related to the certain customers, or a list of pull requests part of your recent release. This kind of data usually doesn't exist in your EC2 instance or the Lambda function or EKS cluster. So you can easily augment these telemetry data like logs and metrics from AWS with the business data in Observe to help you quickly understand the business impact of your ongoing incident or your previous incident. The last but not least, the customers are looking for more customization of their dashboard and more complex the routing for the monitors and alert, which might not be available in AWS CloudWatch natively. So what would be like a typical way to collect these logs and metrics from AWS? To collect metrics as they accumulate or as they happen on AWS, many customers rely on CloudWatch metric streams plus like a firehose, and others prefer to call API metrics API directly by a HTTP poller or the Lambda. To collect the logs, typically you would use like a firehose or the Lambda to send the logs to your destination. I'd like to also to talk about some of the commonly reported issue by our customer for the existing AWS integration. The first one is like the data collected or sent via firehose in the Lambda traverse the public internet, like raising the security and cost concern. And the second is we have offer a limited filtering option in terms of collecting the CloudWatch metrics previously. The last but not least, we have used Lambda to create the snapshot of your AWS resources, but the Lambda could times out when it try to capture the snapshot of lots of AWS resources. So over the next couple of slides, I'd like to highlight some of the improvement we just made for our new AWS integration. The first one is related to the data traversing the public internet I just mentioned before. The customer with a very strict compliance requirements, such as like no data transfer over the public internet, or those seeking to reduce infamous data transfer or the egress costs, will benefit from our updated integration. The new workflow accumulates your CloudWatch logs and CloudWatch metrics and AWS config snapshots in a customer managed S3 bucket first, in a Lambda function behind the scene using the copy object command to send these objects securely to observe S3 buckets. So when the data, these telemetry data is transferred between S3, Amazon S3 buckets, you typically use AWS internal network, avoiding the public internet. This approach not only enhances the security and reduce the latency, but also lower your potential data transfer costs. So if your S3 bucket exists in the same region where your observed tenant exists, and if you're using this in new AWS integration, there will be no data transfer fee will show up on your AWS billing. And if you're using sort of like a cross-region setup, for example, like you have a S3 bucket exists in US East 1, and your observed tenant exists in the US West 2, there might be slight charge for the egress, but it will be dramatically reduced compared to the previously like sending these data through the public internet. In this particular setup I just mentioned, the data egress cost, if you go through like a public internet, could be like 5 to 9 cents per GB. But with the new approach, it'll go down as low as 2 cents per GB. And many of our customers also ask for more precise control, which CloudWatch metrics to collect. Previously in our approach, the old metrics from a region within your S3 AWS account were pushed to observe indiscriminately. The new integration provides a granular filtering option, allowing customer to use a custom filter to specify which AWS services, like AWS EC2 or RDS or the Lambda, and it's a metric name to include or exclude. So for example, on this page, this filter basically excludes the truncate finish point metric from RDS instance. So you can customize this filtering with a granular control. Optionally, Observe also offer a CloudWatch metrics poller, so the customer can filter metrics by even tags as well. This will be my last page in terms of improvement we made before we go to demo. In past, Observe used a Lambda function to capture the state of your AWS resources during the initial setup and the periodic updates. While this worked for most cases, it occasionally failed with a larger scale resource. Like if you have hundreds of thousands of SNS topic subscription, this Lambda might time out to capture that services. To update the update integration now relies on the AWS config, a native AWS service, to collect resource related data. AWS config delivers a configuration snapshot directly to your S3 bucket, which are then securely transferred to Observe. This approach eliminates potential Lambda timeouts, and it scales effortlessly with a larger AWS environment as well. Let me just do a quick time check. Okay. Let me just show you the demo today. 1 second. So what I just described in terms of new AWS integration is already available for all of our customers through the AWS application. We recently released something called AWS Quick Start. It's a streamed down version of our full-fledged AWS app. Either way, you can get access to this new AWS integration. When you go to the connection page for any of these app like AWS Quick Start or the full-fledged AWS app, you will notice these three different options. Then the one I'm just highlighting here is it will be the typical way to push the metrics and logs and resource from one of your AWS region. You can click Get Started button, then fill out your AWS account information, then AWS region, then there are a few toggles you can do, like you can tell us whether you want to collect the logs, metrics in config, then it'll generate the CloudFormation template, so you can continue that work in your AWS console. Then the data will start to flowing once the CloudFormation template is correctly configured. Additionally, let me just cancel this. Additionally, you can use this new metrics folder if you want to filter metric further down by the resource tags you might have for these services. But for today's webinar, I'd like to give you a sneak preview for what's coming, even for this particular flow. We've been working on to improving our data onboarding experience for a user. It's still not visible to majority of our customer, but we have something in progress right now called Add Data Portal. If you go there and click on AWS, let me just try to create like a new one from here. So I'll provide a name of this integration, let's say Canada demo, and I'll pick CA Central 1. Then I need to find my AWS account ID. This is my test environment. Then we will give you like a more granular control upfront in guided UI, how you want to filter these metrics further. By default, we collect certain services, and we have a good set of the list of default metrics we are collecting for each of these services. And you can make the decision here, like whether you want to collect or go with the default option, or you can make the specific change here. Hypothetically, let's say you're not using AWS Kafka, you can turn it off from the get-go, or if you're using AWS RDS, but you might not have a tighter control in terms of what kind of metrics are being collected, you can actually pick and choose the metrics you care more about this. Then more often than necessary, but every time I talk to a customer, a lot of them unfortunately don't have like full visibility of like what is the most important, what is the volume of the metrics they would expect from these services in aggregate. So you can still go with like a default option here. Then I'll show you how you can update this configuration based on actual data you start to see in Observe. Then next, you can do whether you want to collect the logs and the resource. I'll just go with the default option for now. As soon as I click continue, we generate a CloudFormation template based on your choice in this flow. Then let me just go to AWS console. We basically populate all the necessary the field automatically, so you don't have to change anything on this particular page. It just honor what you just select in the previous screen. Then all you need to do is just complete this creation of CloudFormation stack. It might take a few minutes, but we'll continue. Then once it's done, you can acknowledge it. Your CloudFormation stack is up and running. Then you can go to the overview page and see how your data is being flowing. So let me go to other tab. So let's suppose you already have something up and running, then wanted to see what's the volume of these data you've been collecting. So I have a few setup I already did before the webinar. If I go to one of these things, this is an integration I create for my US East 1 region for the same account. And we give you the quick overview of the data volume for the logs and the event per day, the metrics for the metric point per day, and resource is a relatively small number, but like there have been 143 updates over the last 24 hours. So this gives you the quick overview of like what is the data volume you saw for the logs and metric and resource. Then another thing I want to point it out, now we also give you the quick summary of per the service level. So for the RDS, for the last hour, it's been generating like close to like 20,000 metric point. Depending on like how you look at it, you might say, okay, maybe like I don't need this many RDS for many different regions. So if you want to make a change, you can go to configuration page. Literally, like you might say, okay, maybe this is too much. Before I figure out, I can just turn it off. Or you can go to edit metric page and you can pick and choose. Just going through some of the default setup, maybe you can decide, hey, maybe I don't need this Aurora replica lag, or I don't use any of Aurora service today, so maybe I can just turn it off everything. Then when you apply setting and click the update, we generate the specific step you need to go through to clean out your existing AWS CloudFormation stack and give you the new template based on the your updated choice. So that's all I have for the demo. Then the good news here is this AWS flow will be shortly available for our free trial customer first. So after this webinar, if you sign up for free trial, you will be able to see many of our new onboarding experience for these various area. Then either next week or in a few weeks, we'll also enable AWS so you can play with these new integration.